Welcome to Webinar 5 of Introduction to Curriculum Design and Medical Education Scholarship for Resident Trainees. Today we will talk about the implementation phase of Kern's curriculum development for medical education. The goal of this webinar will be to provide the learner with skills to place their curricular design into practice. This is the step that many curriculum designers jump to first and are most excited about. The objectives of this session are as follows. By the end of this webinar, the learner will be able to 1. Identify necessary personnel, time, facilities, and funding for their respective curriculum. 2. Describe 2 potential barriers and corresponding solutions for implementation of their curriculum. And 3. Design a schedule for piloting their curriculum. Let's recap where we are on Kern's 6 steps. We've identified a problem and performed a general needs assessment. We've done a targeted needs assessment of the learners, developed goals and objectives, and then educational strategies. And now we are at the implementation phase. This slide introduces a vignette we will be using for the exercises associated with this webinar. Let's read through this. Dr. Frost is a junior faculty member at Big University Medical Center and is creating a teamwork curriculum for his GME program. Dr. Frost has completed Kern's steps 1 through 4 and is now prepared to move on to the implementation phase. Throughout this webinar, we will help Dr. Frost unveil his new teamwork curriculum. Before we talk about obtaining resources, we should talk about what needs to be supported. It is difficult to ask for resources without a proper understanding of your own curriculum's needs. There is a time to budget and carefully think about what the resources obtained will be used towards. Finally, you have to consider the attainment of facilities, such as lecture halls, sim labs, or even access to patients. Time. Learner time in a finite curriculum and in the era of duty hours is precious. Additionally, you will need administrative support time, as well as faculty time for development and delivery of your curriculum. All curriculums will require educational materials and are an important consideration for resource allocation. This may range from a simple need, such as ebooks and audiovisual equipment, to a more complicated and expensive proposition, such as simulators or ultrasound machines. Finally, your curriculum needs to be hosted somewhere. You'll need to consider where your curriculum will take place. Is it a lecture hall, sim lab, or do you need access to patients? Or do you need a website to host some webinars? You may even need a blog or a wiki. Refer to part 1 of your discussion sheet. Identify in your worksheet what resources Dr. Frost needs to support his team training program. Pause the lecture and take time to complete this portion of the discussion sheet. When you have completed this exercise, please move on to the next section. Support, i.e. funding, is instrumental to supplying the necessary resources for your curriculum. Broadly speaking, there are 2 types of funding. External sources of funding. As your career grows, you can expect to start tapping into external sources of support, such as the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation and national specialty-specific grants. The second type of funding is internal sources of funding, which may arise from undergraduate or graduate medical education grants. Or, curricula can be supported at a more granular level by your sections and departments. Because of this, funding may simply consist of appealing to your respective program directors and chairs for support and resources. As the saying goes, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. It is paramount to understand what resources are already available before asking for funding. For example, if you are implementing a simulation curriculum, then you can investigate if there is an existing laboratory and equipment that can be borrowed at no cost. Or, if you are searching for learner time, you can search for natural holes in the wider curriculum that your medical education project can supplement. Perhaps existing residency administrative support staff can help with the coordination of your curriculum. By understanding what assets you already have at your disposal, your ask for resources is much more palatable to other parties. Refer to part 1 of your discussion sheet. Think about what resources Dr. Frost may already have at his institution that will help him deploy his curriculum. Remember, this is a similar institution as yours. Pause the lecture and take time to complete this portion of the discussion sheet. When you have completed this exercise, please move on to the next section. Barriers. Barriers can be many and threatening to the existence of your curriculum. These barriers fall under 3 general categories. 1. Lack of resources. 2. competition, and 3, resistance. Resource scarcity can come from a lack of funding, space, or materials, all of which require careful thought, planning, and budgeting to overcome. Competition for curricular time can arise if the curriculum is full already, or if your topic is deemed to be overrepresentative or just not important enough. Resistance to curriculum delivery or evaluation methods by the faculty can come from scarcity of faculty bodies or faculty time, general overall resistance to change, lack of compensation, or many other factors. It is important that these barriers are identified early and most ideally proactively so that you as a curriculum designer can hunt for solutions to any potential roadblocks. Refer to part 1 of your discussion sheet. Try to identify what barriers Dr. Frost may face in the implementation of his curriculum. Now that you have identified barriers, try to identify solutions to these potential roadblocks. Pause the lecture and take time to complete this portion of the discussion sheet. When you have completed this exercise, please move on to the next section. So, to recap, at the midway point, we have discussed the following. 1. Understanding needs of your curriculum requires careful budgeting prior to asking for any resources. 2. We then discussed a general framework for funding structures and sources of funding. 3. We reviewed identifying pre-existing assets that can help you deliver your curriculum at a more palatable cost. And 4. We discussed proactive anticipation and solution of any roadblocks to your curriculum, and that this will save time moving forward. Let's move onward to discuss the logistics of unveiling your curriculum. Marketing your curriculum involves getting the right product to the right place at the right time at the right price. Coca-Cola is a great example of being able to obtain this optimal marketing mix. Your goal as a caretaker of the curriculum is to ensure that the curriculum reaches the intended audience at the appropriate time with the goals of the curriculum transmitted to the intended learners. Your curriculum will need to be advertised in such a way that all involved stakeholders, learners, as well as faculty members, are aware of the curriculum. This can be done in a variety of ways: person-to-person, email, website, or even during morning reports. Within this advertisement, the goals and objectives of the curriculum must be clear to the stakeholders, as well as interesting. Finally, timing of the curriculum, advertising, and curriculum delivery is very important. Advertisement of the curriculum must occur in a timely fashion so stakeholders can prepare for the curriculum, as well as be proximal enough to the unveil so that interest does not wane. For example, Dr. Frost may choose to advertise the curriculum in multiple modalities by speaking to the residents during morning report, discussing with faculty members during faculty meetings, and sending a section or department-wide email. And in each modality, Dr. Frost would have to present clear goals and objectives of the curriculum to create interest amongst the stakeholders. Also, advertising the curriculum 1 year before or 1 day before the rollout would make little sense. Dr. Frost would need to identify an optimal lead time to begin marketing his teamwork curriculum. After marketing your curriculum, you will need to understand how to introduce your product. There are 2 traditional ways of introducing your curriculum: a pilot versus a phase-in. Both of these have advantages that we will discuss. Occasionally, time and other constraints can prevent you from using one or the other, and the curriculum will need to be introduced in its entirety all at once without a pilot or a phase-in. However, that is less than ideal. Piloting a curriculum is akin to using training wheels. Piloting certain segments of a new curriculum on a convenient sample of learners can provide valuable information and critical feedback for your curriculum. Since making curriculum is largely an iterative process, this information will increase the probability of initial and sustained success. After piloting a curriculum with a small group of learners, the curriculum designer can obtain valuable information for the eventual full rollout. This is similar to beta testing software products before unveiling the final product. For example, Dr. Frost may choose to pilot his team-building curriculum on graduating residents and then gather feedback from his learners to improve any growing pains he may encounter with his curriculum prior to a full launch. The other option besides a pilot is a phase-in of your curriculum. If you have a more complex curriculum, then phasing your curriculum in piece by piece may be easier for your staff, faculty, and learners to digest new methods and materials. Also, if there is cultural resistance to your curriculum, then a phase-in may promote larger buy-in and less hostility to curriculum implementation. Further, much like a pilot program, a phase-in program can provide valuable feedback for the eventual rollout. For example, Dr. Frost may have designs for a teamwork curriculum that involves simulation, role play, and lectures. However, his GME may not have the resources for simulation currently, but plan on acquiring a sim lab later in the year. So Dr. Frost can begin with a didactic series that includes small group role play, with plans to expand to simulation for the following year. Refer to Part 1 of your discussion sheet. Identify risks and benefits for Dr. Frost using a pilot curriculum versus a phase-in curriculum. Make an argument for one versus the other. Pause the lecture and take time to complete this portion of the discussion sheet. When you have completed this exercise, please move on to the next section. After you have decided on a schedule for implementation, it is important that you have a teaching plan associated with this schedule. This teaching plan will provide a blueprint for the delivery of your curriculum. This teaching plan will highlight the exact time and topic for each activity and what resources, i.e. faculty and materials, are required. Also, this teaching plan may include the specific objective that is desired from the teaching activity. This is a sample teaching plan for a 2-hour course about curriculum implementation. This plan nicely breaks down each different topic and activity, as well as who is responsible for the topic, and then designates what resources are needed for this topic. This creates a nice bird's eye view for the curriculum director and administrative staff to reference in the future. Let's recap the second half of the lecture. We discussed the importance of timely, multi-sourced, clear advertisements to ensure an audience for your curriculum. Next, we discussed the benefits of a pilot versus phase-in versus total implementation of your curriculum. Finally, we discussed the importance of creating a teaching plan in order to have a roadmap laid out for your curricular implementation. After you have reflected on Part 1 and received feedback on your answers, please think about your own scholarly project in medical education. What resources are available to you? What resources will you need to obtain on top of this, and how will you obtain those resources? Do you foresee any barriers to implementation of your curriculum? How will you combat these barriers? Finally, how do you anticipate unveiling your curriculum? Please consider how the materials from this webinar apply to your project and use the feedback that you have received from Part 1. Please complete Part 2 of your discussion sheet. This concludes Webinar 5 of the series, Introduction to Curriculum Design and Medical Education Scholarship for the Resident Trainee. Please continue on to Webinar 6.